In this module, we're going to be covering scripting. Now, scripting may look intimidating at first glance, with its alien language and words meaning different things than what you think they mean in everyday use, but don't worry about that. The definitions in code tend to be more abstract. In this example, floats are non-whole numbers, meaning digits. Functions are subsections of the scripts used for specific tasks for the sake of keeping the code clean and manageable. Classes, in our example, is going to be the whole script. Unity has made programming significantly more easier. Of course, still have to put some virtual elbow grease in there, but don't worry about that. It's not like the olden days where you had to build your own engine from scratch, including the physics. All the physics are done for you. You just have to manipulate it to your liking. Now, before we move on, I should clarify that I'm using Visual Studio as my code editor. If you don't have Visual Studio Community, don't worry about that. Unity already comes with a default code editor called MonoDevelop, and it works just fine. Visual Studio is not required in this video. Though if you do want to switch to Visual Studio, go to Edit, Preferences, External Tools, External Script Editor, and you could switch it from there. To enter your code editor, go to Scripts, double-click on Player Movement, and if you want to make a new script, you can right-click, Create, C# script. But in this case, we're going to go to Player. Alright, what we want to do is make the player jump, because as you saw, all the player can do can move, and I've had to use the editor to get on top of objects and such. It's relatively simple, and we'll cover the architecture of a simple script as we go along. And to make the player jump, first the script needs access to the rigid body. We could actually link the rigid body to our script by getting the component. But first we need to make a variable for it. And what a variable is a collection of data, be it numbers or true or false statements, which are called booleans, or plain text, which are called strings. So to get the rigid body, we're going to type in private. And what private basically means is that it won't show up editable in the editor like speed is. Speed is already visible in the Unity editor. Private is not. And a private variable cannot be accessed through other scripts either. It's just exclusive to the script it's initialized in. And for rigid body, we're just going to type in rigid body 2D. And make sure it's 2D. And you can name the variable whatever you want, but I like to abbreviate it to RB2D. And above it, we're going to make another variable. This time it's going to be public, so we can edit it in the editor. And it's going to be a float. Float is basically a non-whole number, meaning digits. You could have whole numbers like 4 or 6, but it's mostly used for digits like 4.5 or 8.75. Floats are mostly used for health or measuring distance between enemies. And we're going to name this Jump Force. First, we need to get the rigid body component in the start function. The start function is called automatically at the start of runtime, basically when you press the play mode button. And it will call only once. It's only a tenth of a second when a function is called. And to get the rigid body, we're going to type in our rigid body variable. And we're going to type in get component. Make sure you put rigid body 2D so that it matches. This will give us access to our rigid body and the functions it has. There's also a function called movement, which is responsible for allowing the player to have movement, and it's called in the update function. The update function basically runs every single frame during runtime, so it's checking every split second if we're moving or not. I like to keep functions as single use. It helps make clean code and less confusion. With that in mind, we're going to type in a separate function for jumping. We're going to make this private. Like variables, if a function is private, it won't be accessed through any other script. You could also have it private by not typing in private and just starting with void then title. I like to type that it's private or public in case somebody looks at my code and gets confused. It just helps with some clarification. Of course, just saying we're going to have it jump doesn't mean much. We need to map it to a button. So we're going to use an if statement. Basically saying if this condition is met, do this. And in this case, we're going to access input. Input is used for gamepad input, and in this case, keyboard input. There are several different factions of inputs, like in movement, I'm using getAxis. GetAxis is mapped to certain buttons. Horizontal, for example, is mapped to the arrow keys and the A and D key specifically. Here, we're going to access key code, which maps a specific key. And we're going to use getKeyDown specifically. GetKey calls every second it's pushed down. GetKeyDown is only pressed once when it's pressed down. And getKeyUp when the key or / button is released after being pressed down. Think like charge attacks in other games, that's where the key up comes from. Here we're going to use key down. And in order to call it, we're going to type in keycode, period, space. This will map our action to the space bar. Now the reason we needed the rigid body is because it has a function called add force that we can access, and is used specifically for jumping. So we're going to type in rigid body, period, add force. This is basically a function that adds force to objects depending on vector, starting with the x vector, which is horizontal left to right, so this is going to be 0. And the second one is vertical up and down, which is what we do want. So we're going to put jump force in here. And of course we're going to make jump force positive so that it jumps up. Oh, I forgot to make sure new vector 2. The function only takes vectors and needs it specified. And then the second option is force mode, so we could determine how instant the force is. So we're going to type in force mode. Make sure it's force mode 2D specifically. And we're going to go impulse. So now we have the function built out, but it's not going to be called if we use it right here because we have no access to it. So we're going to put it in the update function. So Control S to save so that Unity can get the update. Go back to Unity. It's going to load for a bit. And now we have a new variable called jump force in the player script. Let's set it to 4 for now. Press play. Let's check it out. See, that's a good jump, but we can make it better. Let's set jump force to 10. There we go. Now, of course, it just makes the player jump. We could exploit it by continually press jumping and then he'll go off screen. You would need to put in another if statement to set a condition for the player so that they can't jump. In this video, we covered the basics of scripting, how to get components, how to make variables, how to make functions, and how to call functions. Feel free to experiment if you need to before moving on to the next video where we explain 2 special functions, specifically for collision and physics.